Before we begin, if you enjoy inspiring life stories, please subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Your support helps us bring more meaningful stories about life, success, family, retirement, and personal growth. Now, let's begin today's powerful story. The banker who thought his life was over after retirement. A heart-touching retirement story for ages 45 to 60. For more than 35 years, Michael Anderson lived by the same routine. Every morning at 6 a.m., he woke up before sunrise. He would put on his neatly pressed suit, drink a cup of black coffee, kiss his wife goodbye, and drive to the bank where he had spent almost his entire career. Michael was not just a banker. He was respected, trusted, important. People greeted him with smiles. Employees waited for his decisions. Customers asked specifically for him. His office door carried a title he had worked decades to earn. Senior Branch Manager. For 35 years, that title became part of his identity. Then one day, everything changed. At age 60, retirement arrived. The bank organized a beautiful farewell ceremony. There were speeches, flowers, gifts, a large cake. Many employees shared stories about how Michael had mentored them. Some even cried. His boss stood up and said, "Michael, your contribution to this bank will never be forgotten." The room erupted in applause. Michael smiled. But deep inside, he felt something he couldn't explain. Fear. As everyone celebrated his future freedom, Michael wondered, what happens tomorrow? The next morning, for the first time in 35 years, there was no alarm clock. No meetings. No emails. No customers waiting. No office. Just silence. At first, retirement felt wonderful. Michael slept late, watched television, read newspapers, relaxed. But after a few weeks, something began to change. The silence grew louder. The days felt longer. The phone stopped ringing. Former colleagues became busy with their own work. The bank moved on without him. Slowly, Michael felt invisible. One afternoon, he stood outside the bank where he had spent most of his life. Through the glass doors, he could see new employees working. Customers walking in and out. Business continuing as usual. Nobody noticed him standing there. At that moment, a painful thought entered his mind. Maybe I was never that important after all. He returned home feeling empty. That evening, his wife Sarah noticed something was wrong. "You've been quiet lately," she said. Michael forced a smile. "I'm fine." But he wasn't. For months, he struggled with feelings he had never experienced before. Loneliness. Loss. Confusion. His title was gone. His routine was gone. His sense of purpose seemed gone too. One rainy afternoon, while cleaning the attic, Michael found an old wooden box. Inside were dozens of letters. Some were from customers. Others were from young employees he had trained years ago. Curious, he began reading them. One letter said, "Mr. Anderson, thank you for believing in me when nobody else did. Because of your encouragement, I became a branch manager." Another read, "You helped me get my first small business loan. Today my company employs 50 people. I will never forget your kindness." A third letter said, "You taught me that banking is not about money. It's about people." Michael sat quietly. Tears filled his eyes. For the first time in months, he realized something important. His true value had never been his job title. His true value had always been the lives he touched. That night, he couldn't stop thinking. Maybe retirement wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning of a new chapter. The next morning, Michael made a decision. Instead of focusing on what he had lost, he would focus on what he could still give. He contacted a local community center. They were looking for volunteers to teach financial literacy. Michael immediately signed up. At first, only a handful of people attended his classes. Young adults struggling with debt. Single parents trying to manage finances. Small business owners needing guidance. Michael shared everything he had learned during his 35-year banking career. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. His classes became incredibly popular. People traveled from different towns to hear him speak. One day, a young woman approached him after class. Tears were running down her face. "Mr. Anderson," she said softly, "because of your advice, I paid off all my debt and saved my home. You changed my life." Michael stood speechless. That single moment gave him more satisfaction than any promotion he had ever received. Years later, Michael became known throughout the community. Not as a banker, not as a branch manager, but as a mentor, a teacher, a guide, someone who helped people build better lives. On his 70th birthday, more than 200 people gathered to celebrate him. Former students, business owners, families he had helped, people whose lives had changed because of his wisdom. During the celebration, someone asked him, "Michael, what was the biggest lesson retirement taught you?" The room became silent. Michael smiled. Then he answered, "Retirement doesn't mean your purpose ends. It simply means your purpose changes." He paused, then added, "The world may stop needing your position, but it never stops needing your experience, your wisdom, and your kindness." Many people in the room wiped away tears, because they knew he was right. As we grow older, we often fear retirement. We fear becoming irrelevant. We fear losing our identity. We fear being forgotten. But the truth is this: your career is only one chapter of your life, not the entire story. The skills you've learned, the lessons you've earned, the wisdom you've collected, these things become even more valuable after retirement. Michael spent 35 years helping people with money. But his greatest impact came after he retired, because retirement gave him the freedom to serve people in a deeper way. And perhaps that's the real secret of life. Success is not measured by how long you work. Success is measured by how many lives become better because you are here. So if you're approaching retirement, or already retired, remember this: your best years may not be behind you. They may be waiting just ahead. And sometimes, the most beautiful chapter of your life begins the day you think the story is ending. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who may need this message today. Thank you for watching. Red Heart, the retired banker, and his heartbreaking retirement story that will touch your soul. In the peaceful town of Naperville, Illinois, lived a 67-year-old retired banker named William Carter. For nearly 40 years, William had worked at one of the largest banks in the city. Every morning before sunrise, he would leave home wearing his dark blue suit, carrying his leather briefcase. People respected him. Employees admired him. Customers trusted him. To the outside world, William Carter was a successful man. But behind his success was a sacrifice nobody truly understood. William had lost countless moments with his family. He missed birthdays, school events, family vacations, and most painfully, he missed much of his son Ethan's childhood. Whenever Ethan asked, "Dad, can you come to my baseball game?" William would smile and say, "I'm sorry, son. I have an important meeting." When Ethan asked, "Dad, can we go fishing this weekend?" William would answer, "Maybe next week." But next week never came. Years passed. William kept working, always believing he was doing it for his family, always believing one day they would understand. Retirement day. At age 65, William finally retired. The bank organized a grand farewell ceremony. People gave speeches. They presented him with a crystal award. Many employees cried. His manager said, "William Carter is one of the greatest bankers this institution has ever known." The room erupted into applause. William smiled proudly. But while driving home that evening, he realized something strange. There was nobody waiting to celebrate with him. His wife had passed away 3 years earlier after a battle with cancer. His son Ethan lived in another state. And for the first time in 40 years, William was completely alone. The silent house. The next morning, William woke up at 5:30 a.m. His body still followed the routine of a banker. He put on a shirt, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the empty chair across from him. The house was silent. Too silent. For decades, he had dreamed of retirement. Now retirement felt like a prison. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. The phone rarely rang. Nobody knocked on the door. Nobody needed him anymore. One afternoon, he opened an old family photo album. As he turned the pages, tears slowly filled his eyes. There was Ethan at 6 years old, holding a baseball bat, smiling proudly. William suddenly remembered something. That was the day Ethan had begged him to come to his championship game. William never showed up. He had chosen work instead. For the first time, he wondered how many memories his son carried that he had completely forgotten. The phone call. One rainy evening, William gathered the courage to call Ethan. The phone rang several times. Finally, Ethan answered. "Hello? Hi, son. It's Dad." There was a brief silence. Then Ethan replied politely. "Hey, Dad." William smiled. "How are you?" "I'm busy." The conversation lasted less than 2 minutes. When the call ended, William sat quietly in his chair. His heart felt heavy. The distance between them wasn't measured in miles. It was measured in years. Years of missed moments. Years of broken promises. Years of choosing work over family. A father's regret. That night William couldn't sleep. He walked through the house, looking at old photographs. Every picture reminded him of something he had missed. A school graduation. A birthday party. A father-son camping trip that never happened. For the first time in his life, William cried. Not because he had retired. Not because he felt old. But because he realized he could never buy back time. No amount of money. No promotion. No banking award could return the years he lost with his son. The letter. The next morning, William sat at his desk and began writing. Not a business letter. Not a financial report. But a letter to his son. For hours he wrote. He wrote about his regrets. His mistakes. His guilt. His love. When he finished, the letter simply said, "Dear Ethan, I spent my entire life trying to provide for you. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that what you needed most was not my money. You needed me. I missed your childhood. I missed your victories. I missed your struggles. And for that, I am deeply sorry. If I could relive my life, I would choose more baseball games and fewer meetings. More family dinners and fewer business trips. More time with you and less time chasing success. I don't know if it's too late, but I hope someday you can forgive me. Love, Dad." William mailed the letter and waited. Days passed. Then weeks. No response. His heart sank deeper every day. The unexpected visit. 3 weeks later, there was a knock at the door. William slowly walked to the entrance. When he opened the door, he froze. Standing there was Ethan. For a moment neither of them spoke. Then Ethan held up the letter. Tears filled his eyes. "I read this 10 times. William's voice trembled. "I'm sorry, son." Ethan looked away. "I spent years being angry." William lowered his head. "I know," Ethan continued. "When I was a kid, I thought the bank was more important than me." Those words pierced William's heart. The old man began to cry. Real tears. The kind that come from years of regret. For several moments, neither man spoke. Then Ethan stepped forward and hugged his father. The first real hug they had shared in many years. William broke down completely. At that moment, all the success, money, promotions, and achievements of his banking career meant nothing. Nothing compared to the simple embrace. The final lesson. From that day forward, Ethan visited regularly. They went fishing. shared meals, talked for hours, slowly rebuilding the relationship they had lost. One afternoon, while sitting beside a lake, Ethan asked, "Dad, after everything you've learned, what's the biggest lesson of your life?" William looked at the water, then quietly answered, "A career can give you a living, but family gives you a life." Ethan nodded, and for the first time in decades, father and son sat together in peace. Moral of the story: many people spend their entire lives working hard for their families. But sometimes, while building a future for those we love, we accidentally miss the present with them. Money can be earned again. Careers can be rebuilt. But lost time never returns. So if your parents are still alive, call them. If your children are waiting for you, spend time with them. Because one day retirement will come. And the memories you create today will become the greatest wealth you own. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with someone who needs this message. Red Heart. Remember, success is not measured by the money in your bank account, but by the people who still want to sit beside you when everything else is gone. Before we begin, if you enjoy inspiring retirement stories and life lessons, please subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Every week, we share powerful stories about retirement, second chances, financial wisdom, and finding purpose after 50. Now, let's begin today's emotional story. The retired banker who found a new purpose at 58, a heart-touching American retirement story. In the quiet suburbs of Charlotte, North Carolina, lived a man named Robert Harrison. At 58 years old, Robert was preparing for something he had both dreamed about and feared for years: retirement. For over 32 years, Robert had worked at a respected bank in downtown Charlotte. He started as a young teller when he was only 26 years old. Back then, he had a simple dream. He wanted a stable life, a beautiful home, a loving family, and enough money to provide for the people he loved. Year after year, he worked tirelessly. Early mornings, late nights, missed holidays, missed family vacations, missed school events for his children. Like many hard-working Americans, Robert always believed he would make up for everything after retirement. "One day I'll have time." That became his favorite sentence. One day. One day. One day. Then suddenly, that day arrived. On a Friday afternoon in June, Robert walked out of the bank for the last time. His co-workers organized a retirement party. There were balloons, cake, photographs from his long career. Everyone praised him. Everyone thanked him. Everyone wished him happiness. As he drove home, Robert smiled. He believed the best years of his life were about to begin. But life had a different plan. The first week felt amazing. He slept late, watched baseball, had breakfast with his wife Linda, took long walks around the neighborhood. For the first time in decades, he felt free. But by the third month, everything changed. The freedom started feeling like emptiness. His children lived in different states. His friends were still working. His phone rarely rang. Nobody needed him anymore. At least, that's what he believed. One morning, Robert sat alone on his porch. A cup of coffee rested in his hands. The street was quiet. The birds were singing. Yet inside, he felt lost. For 32 years, he had been somebody. A banker. A manager. A leader. Now he was just another retired man sitting on a porch. That thought broke his heart. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. His energy disappeared. His motivation faded. Even Linda began noticing changes. One evening she gently asked, "Robert, are you happy?" He stared at the floor. For a long moment he said nothing. Then tears filled his eyes. "I'm not sure who I am anymore." Linda reached for his hand. After 35 years of marriage, she understood exactly what he meant. Many retirees face the same struggle. They don't miss the work. They miss the purpose. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. Robert visited a local coffee shop. While waiting in line, he overheard a young man speaking on the phone. The young man sounded desperate. "I don't know what to do. The bank rejected my loan application." After the call ended, Robert introduced himself. The young man's name was Daniel. He wanted to start a small landscaping business, but knew very little about finance. For the next hour, Robert sat with him. He explained budgeting, loans, cash flow, business planning, everything. Daniel listened carefully. Before leaving, he smiled and said, "Sir, you've helped me more in 1 hour than anyone else has in 6 months." Robert drove home that day feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. Useful. Needed. Alive. That conversation changed everything. Soon Robert began volunteering at a local business center. Every week he met entrepreneurs, young families, and struggling business owners. He taught them how to manage money, how to avoid debt, how to build financial security. People loved his advice, not because he was a former banker, but because he genuinely cared. One day a single mother named Jennifer attended one of his workshops. She was drowning in debt, working 2 jobs, barely surviving. Robert spent months helping her create a financial plan. A year later, Jennifer returned. She handed Robert a photograph of her new home. With tears in her eyes, she said, "You helped me believe this was possible." Robert couldn't speak. He simply smiled. At that moment, he realized something important. His greatest contribution to the world wasn't made inside a bank. It was happening now. After retirement, as the years passed, Robert became known throughout Charlotte. Local newspapers wrote articles about him. Community organizations invited him to speak. Young entrepreneurs sought his guidance. Retirees came to him for advice. Ironically, he became more fulfilled after retirement than he had ever been during his career. One afternoon, on his 65th birthday, Robert sat on the same porch where he had once felt lost. But this time was different. His phone constantly rang. People visited. Students sent thank you cards. Business owners shared success stories. The loneliness was gone. The emptiness had disappeared. Linda sat beside him and smiled. "Remember when you thought retirement was the end?" Robert laughed. Then he looked at the sunset and replied, "No, it was the beginning." He realized that careers eventually end. Titles disappear. Office doors close. But wisdom never retires. Experience never retires. Kindness never retires. And purpose never retires. Purpose simply changes. Moral of the story. If you are over 50 and approaching retirement, remember this. Retirement is not about stopping. It is about starting a different journey. The world still needs your knowledge, your experience, your mistakes, your lessons, your wisdom. Because someone out there is struggling with a problem you've already solved. Someone out there needs the guidance you can provide. And sometimes, the most meaningful chapter of life begins after the career chapter ends. So never think retirement means your story is over. For many people, it's only the beginning of their greatest chapter. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with someone approaching retirement. Your support helps us continue bringing inspiring stories every week. Red Heart. The banker who lost everything except hope. An inspirational retirement story about family, regret, and second chances. In Boston, Massachusetts, there lived a banker named Richard Thompson. At 68 years old, Richard had everything most people dream about. A beautiful house, a luxury car, a large retirement fund, a successful career spanning more than 40 years. For decades, people admired him. When Richard entered a room, people stood up. His opinions mattered. His decisions affected millions of dollars. He was one of the most respected senior bankers in the city. But deep inside, Richard carried a secret pain. The higher he climbed professionally, the further he drifted from the people he loved. Especially his only son, Daniel. A father's sacrifice. When Daniel was young, he worshipped his father. Every evening he waited near the front window, watching the street, hoping his father would come home early. But Richard rarely did. There were always meetings, always clients, always deadlines, always another deal to close. One evening, 8-year-old Daniel ran toward his father carrying a drawing. "Dad! Look what I made!" Richard barely glanced at it. "That's nice, son. Maybe later. I have important work." Daniel's smile disappeared. Richard didn't notice. He was already answering another phone call. Years passed. The same pattern repeated itself. Richard told himself he was doing everything for his family. He wanted Daniel to have opportunities he never had. A better education. A better life. A secure future. But Daniel wanted something much simpler. He wanted his father. The day everything changed. At age 65, Richard retired. His farewell ceremony was unforgettable. Hundreds attended. Executives praised him. Colleagues applauded him. The bank presented him with a gold watch. Everyone called him a legend. As he stood on stage accepting the award, Richard felt proud. But when he returned home that evening, the house felt empty. His wife had passed away years earlier. Daniel lived thousands of miles away in Seattle. There was no celebration. No family dinner. No warm embrace waiting for him. Only silence. For the first time in 40 years, Richard had nowhere to go the next morning. The loneliest year. Retirement hit him harder than he expected. The phone stopped ringing. The emails stopped coming. Nobody asked for advice anymore. Nobody needed approval anymore. The world moved on. Without him. Every morning Richard sat by the kitchen window, coffee in hand, watching strangers walk by. Sometimes entire days passed without speaking to another person. One cold winter evening, he found himself staring at old family photographs. There was Daniel. At age 10. At age 15. At graduation. Smiling in every picture. But Richard realized something heartbreaking. He barely remembered many of those moments. Because he had been too busy working. Tears filled his eyes. For the first time, he questioned his definition of success. The hospital call. One snowy night, Richard suddenly collapsed. A neighbor found him unconscious and called an ambulance. When Richard woke up in the hospital, he looked around the room. Machines beeped softly. Doctors moved quietly. Visitors came and went for other patients. But nobody sat beside him. Nobody. The successful banker, who had managed millions of dollars, was completely alone. The nurse asked, "Would you like us to contact a family member?" Richard hesitated, then whispered, "My son." The nurse called Daniel. A son's decision. When Daniel received the call, he was shocked. Despite years of distance, he immediately booked a flight. The next morning, he entered the hospital room. Richard looked up and saw his son standing there. For a moment, neither spoke. Years of hurt filled the silence. Finally, Richard broke down. "I'm sorry." Daniel remained quiet. "I miss so much." Still silence. Tears rolled down Richard's face. "I spent my life building wealth, but I forgot to build memories." Daniel's eyes began to water. For years, he had wanted to hear those words. Not excuses. Not explanations. Just honesty. And now, finally, his father was giving it to him. The second chance. After Richard recovered, Daniel made a surprising decision. He invited his father to move closer to his family in Seattle. Richard accepted. For the first time in decades, father and son began spending time together. Richard attended his grandson's soccer games, helped with homework, read bedtime stories, things he had never done with Daniel. One evening, while watching the sunset, Daniel asked, "Dad, do you regret working so much?" Richard thought for a moment, then answered honestly, "No." Daniel looked surprised. Richard smiled. "I don't regret working hard. I regret forgetting why I was working hard. A new purpose. Instead of spending retirement feeling sorry for himself, Richard decided to help others. He began teaching free financial literacy classes. Young families attended. College students attended. Small business owners attended. Retirees attended. Richard shared everything he had learned throughout his banking career. Not just about money, but about life. One day a young man approached him after class. "Sir, I came here hoping to learn about investing." Richard smiled. "And did you?" The young man nodded. "Yes, but I learned something more important." "What was that?" The young man replied. "Money is important, but the people you love are priceless." Richard's eyes filled with tears, because that lesson had cost him 40 years to learn. The legacy. At age 75, Richard was no longer known as a retired banker. He was known as a mentor, a teacher, a grandfather, a father, a friend. One evening, while sitting with his grandson, he was asked, "Grandpa, what is the secret to a successful life?" Richard looked toward the horizon. The same horizon he had ignored for decades while chasing success. Then he answered, "Work hard. Dream big. Save wisely. But never become so busy making a living that you forget to make a life." His grandson smiled. And Richard smiled back. Because he finally understood something. The greatest investment is not stocks. Not real estate. Not bank accounts. The greatest investment is the people you love. And unlike money, the return on that investment lasts forever. Final message. If you are in your 50s or approaching retirement, remember this. One day your office will belong to someone else. Your title will belong to someone else. Your desk will belong to someone else. But your family will always be yours. Spend time with them. Call your parents. Visit your children. Create memories. Because when retirement finally arrives, those memories will become your greatest wealth. And sometimes, the most beautiful chapter of life begins after the career chapter ends. If this story inspired you, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who needs this message today. Red Heart. Remember, a successful career may fill your bank account, but a loving family fills your heart. The bank COO who realized too late. A sad and emotional story about success, regret, and life. In New York City, there lived a man named James Whitmore. At 72 years old, James was known as one of the most successful banking executives in America. For more than 45 years, he had dedicated his life to banking. He started as a junior analyst at the age of 24. Smart, ambitious, hardworking. James quickly climbed the corporate ladder. Year after year, promotion after promotion, he moved higher. Eventually, he became the chief operating officer, COO, of one of the largest banks in the country. His office occupied the top floor of a skyscraper overlooking Manhattan. He earned millions of dollars, owned luxury homes, drove expensive cars, traveled around the world. To many people, James had achieved the American dream. But there was a price. A price nobody saw. Chasing success. James worked every holiday, every weekend, every vacation. Even family dinners often ended with phone calls and emails. His wife, Susan, would often say, "James, the bank will survive without you for one day." James always smiled. "I'll rest later." But later never came. His daughter Emily wanted him at her school graduation. He missed it. His son Michael wanted him at his baseball championship. He missed that too. Every missed moment seemed small at the time. After all, he was building a future. Or so he believed. The empty mansion. Years passed. The children grew up. His wife grew older. Life moved forward. Then one day Susan became seriously ill. Doctors diagnosed her with cancer. For the first time in decades, James tried to slow down. But he had already spent most of his life away. Many nights Susan sat alone in hospital rooms, while James attended meetings. One evening she looked at him and quietly said, "I never wanted your money, James." He looked confused. She smiled sadly. "I just wanted more of your time." Those words stayed with him forever. A year later, Susan passed away. The mansion that once felt luxurious suddenly felt empty. Retirement. At age 67, James finally retired. The bank organized a grand farewell ceremony. Hundreds of executives attended. The CEO called him a legend. Employees applauded for several minutes. A large video highlighted his achievements. Millions of dollars managed. Thousands of employees supervised. Decades of success. As James stood on stage, everyone celebrated his career. Yet inside, he felt strangely hollow. When the event ended, people shook his hand. Then they returned to work. The next morning, another executive sat in his office. Another name appeared on the door. The bank continued exactly as before. For the first time, James realized a painful truth. The institution he gave his entire life to did not stop without him. The loneliness. Retirement was far more difficult than James expected. His children rarely called. Not because they hated him. They simply had their own lives. The same way he once had his. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. The phone rarely rang. The email stopped completely. Nobody needed his approval. Nobody asked for meetings. Nobody cared about quarterly reports anymore. One rainy afternoon, James sat alone in his living room, surrounded by awards, certificates, trophies, recognition plaques. He looked around, then whispered to himself, "What was it all for?" The room remained silent. The hospital bed. At age 71, James suffered a serious heart attack. He was rushed to the hospital. For several days, he remained under observation. One evening he woke up in a quiet hospital room. Outside, snow was falling. Inside, machines beeped softly. He looked around. There were no executives, no board members, no shareholders, no clients. Only a nurse checking his heartbeat. The nurse smiled kindly. "Do you want me to call someone?" James thought for a moment, then whispered, "My children." The visit. The next day, Emily and Michael arrived. For the first time in years, they sat beside their father. Gray-haired now. Older. More fragile. James looked at them with tears in his eyes. "I'm sorry." Neither child spoke. "I thought success meant providing everything." His voice trembled. "I forgot that what you needed most was me." Emily quietly wiped away tears. Michael looked toward the window. The pain of decades could not disappear instantly. But they understood something. Their father was finally being honest. For the first time in his life. The final conversation. A few months later, James' health continued to decline. Doctors warned that he didn't have much time left. One evening, while sitting with his children, James shared his final lesson. He said, "When I was young, I thought money would make me successful. When I became a manager, I wanted to become a director. When I became a director, I wanted to become COO. When I became COO, I wanted to be remembered." He paused, then looked at his children. "But now, none of that matters." The room became silent. James continued, "The people I loved were my greatest investment. And unfortunately, I invested too little." Tears rolled down his face. Emily held his hand. Michael sat beside him. For the first time in decades, the family simply sat together. No meetings. No deadlines. No business calls. Just family. The end. A few weeks later, James Whitmore passed away peacefully in his sleep. At his funeral, many banking leaders attended. Former executives praised his achievements. Newspapers wrote about his remarkable career. But the most powerful words came from his son Michael. Standing before hundreds of people, he said, "My father taught me many things about business, but his final lesson was the most important." Michael paused, then continued, "He taught me that success without family is an empty victory." Many people in the room wiped away tears, because deep down, they knew it was true. Moral of the story: one day your office will belong to someone else. Your title will belong to someone else. Your parking space will belong to someone else. Your desk will belong to someone else. But the people who love you are irreplaceable. Work hard. Build your career. Chase your dreams. But never forget the people waiting for you at home. Because at the end of life, nobody wishes they had attended one more meeting. They wish they had spent more time with the people they loved. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who is working hard for a better future. Red Heart, remember, the richest person is not the one with the biggest bank account, but the one surrounded by love when the final chapter of life arrives. The bank manager who died with a full bank account and an empty heart, a powerful retirement story about regret, family, and the true meaning of success. In Chicago, Illinois, there lived a man named David Anderson. At 76 years old, David sat alone beside a hospital window. Outside, snow covered the city streets. Inside, the room was silent. The machines beside his bed beeped softly. His hands trembled with age. His hair had turned completely white. His body was weak. And for the first time in his life, David had nothing left to manage. No employees. No meetings. No clients. No billion-dollar accounts. Only memories. And regrets. The beginning. 50 years earlier, David was a young man with big dreams. He grew up in a poor neighborhood. His father worked in a factory. His mother cleaned houses. Money was always a problem. Many nights the family worried about paying bills. David promised himself something. One day he would become rich. One day his family would never struggle again. One day he would be successful. That promise became his obsession. At age 23, he got his first job at a bank. He worked harder than everyone else. He arrived first, left last, worked weekends, worked holidays. His supervisors noticed. Promotions came quickly. Within 15 years, David became branch manager. 10 years later, regional manager. Then senior executive. Eventually, he became one of the most respected banking leaders in Illinois. His salary grew larger every year. His home became bigger. His cars became more expensive. His investments multiplied. To the world, he looked like a winner. But life was quietly collecting a debt. A debt money could never repay. The little boy at the window. David had a son named Ryan. Every evening Ryan waited near the front window, watching cars pass by, waiting for his father. His mother would often say, "Daddy is working." Ryan would nod, then continue waiting. One night, when Ryan was 7 years old, he fell asleep beside the window. Still waiting. David came home after midnight. He found his son sleeping on the couch. A small birthday card rested in Ryan's hands. On the front it read, "Happy birthday, Dad. I waited for you." David felt bad, but not bad enough. The next morning another business meeting demanded his attention. Life moved on. Years of success. As the years passed, David achieved everything he ever wanted. He bought a lake house, a vacation property in Florida, luxury cars, designer watches. His bank account continued growing. But something else was shrinking. His relationship with his son. Ryan stopped asking him to attend baseball games. Stopped asking him to go fishing. Stopped asking him to spend time together. Eventually, Ryan stopped asking for anything. At the time, David thought that made life easier. Years later he realized it was one of the saddest moments of his life. Because children stop asking when they stop expecting. Retirement day. At age 68, David retired. The farewell ceremony was extraordinary. Hundreds attended. Executives praised him. Employees applauded. A large screen displayed photos from his 45-year career. People called him a legend. A role model. A banking icon. David smiled proudly. But when the ceremony ended, something strange happened. Everyone returned to work. The next day another manager occupied his office. Another name appeared on the door. The company moved forward without missing a beat. David suddenly understood a painful truth. The place he gave his life to didn't actually need him. Not anymore. The empty mansion. Retirement was supposed to be the reward. Instead, it became the punishment. His large mansion felt like a museum. Beautiful, expensive, and empty. His wife had passed away 2 years earlier. Ryan lived across the country in California. Weeks passed without visitors. Months passed without meaningful conversations. One afternoon, David walked through his home. Every room contained expensive furniture. Yet there was no laughter. No family dinners. No children's voices. No memories being created. Only silence. The kind of silence that money cannot fix. The discovery. One rainy evening, David opened an old box hidden in the attic. Inside were hundreds of photographs. As he looked through them, he noticed something shocking. In almost every family picture, someone was missing. Him. Birthday parties. School graduations. Family vacations. Christmas mornings. His family was smiling. But David wasn't there. Because he was working. The realization hit him harder than any financial loss ever had. He had spent 45 years building wealth, but neglected the people he wanted to share it with. For the first time, the successful banker cried like a child. The hospital. At age 76, David's health declined rapidly. One evening he suffered heart failure. Doctors admitted him to the hospital. Days later, lying in bed, David stared at the ceiling. For the first time, he knew his life was coming to an end. Suddenly none of his achievements mattered. Not the promotions. Not the money. Not the awards. Not the titles. Nothing. Only one thing mattered. His son. The phone call. With shaking hands, David picked up the phone. He called Ryan. When Ryan answered, David struggled to speak. His voice cracked. "Son!" There was silence. Then Ryan replied softly. "Dad." David began crying. "I don't know how much time I have left." Ryan remained silent. For years, he had carried pain. Years of disappointment. Years of absence. Years of unanswered hopes. Finally, David whispered, "I spent my whole life preparing for tomorrow. And I forgot to live today." Tears rolled down both their faces. The final visit. 2 days later, Ryan arrived. The moment he entered the room, David broke down. He looked older. Smaller. Fragile. Nothing like the powerful executive he once was. Ryan walked slowly toward the bed. For several moments neither spoke. Then David said something he had never said before. "You deserved a better father." The room fell silent. Ryan wiped away tears. David continued. "I thought success meant money. I thought success meant promotions. I thought success meant becoming important." His voice trembled. "But I was wrong." Ryan held his father's hand. David looked into his son's eyes. "The greatest investment I ever had was you. And I neglected it." The two men cried together. Years of pain. Years of regret. Years of lost opportunities. All meeting in one heartbreaking moment. His final lesson. That evening David shared his final words. Words Ryan would remember forever. He said, "People spend their health earning money. Then spend their money trying to buy back their health. They sacrifice family for work. And later sacrifice everything for one more day with family." He took a deep breath. Then smiled. "If you ever become successful, don't make my mistake. Make money. But don't let money make your decisions. Love your family while they're still here." A tear rolled down Ryan's cheek. He nodded. "I promise, Dad." The end. 3 days later, David Anderson passed away peacefully. At his funeral, business leaders praised his career. Newspapers celebrated his achievements. Bank executives spoke about his success. But Ryan spoke about something else. Standing before hundreds of people, he said, "My father built an incredible career. But his greatest achievement wasn't banking." Ryan looked toward the sky. Then smiled. "His greatest achievement was teaching me, before it was too late, what truly matters." Final message. One day your job will post an advertisement to replace you. Your office will belong to someone else. Your title will belong to someone else. But your family can never replace you. So call your parents. Spend time with your children. Love your spouse. Create memories. Because in the final chapter of life, people don't remember bank balances. They remember moments. And moments are the only wealth that lasts forever. Red Heart, if this story touched your heart, please subscribe, like, and share this video. Remember, a career is what you do. Family is who you are.